Our next guest recently became the first Army Reserve officer to receive both the Basic Aviation Badge with Astronaut Device and Space Badge. In her main job, she's a microbiologist and NASA astronaut. How about that? Federal News Network's Eric White got the full story when he spoke to Kate Rubins.
I definitely have an identity crisis. I've got a lot of identities. So I'm a scientist, I'm a soldier, I'm an astronaut. I'm also like a gardener and a reader. So I do kind of get made fun of sometimes because people say I've got about 6 jobs, but I really love what I do. And these jobs can be very overlapping and complementary. A lot of the skills that I've learned being an Army Reserve soldier are very directly applicable to being an astronaut. So I would call it a blended identity.
Can you give me just one example about how they overlap and where you were able to implement some of the skills you learned from one trade and bleed it into the other?
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you a couple examples. So there's a very practical and literal example of land navigation. So a big part of the Army, the move part of shoot, move, and communicate. And so we do a lot of land navigation training. What people probably don't know is that this is also important to our NASA job. So NASA's returning to the moon. We're sending astronauts to the south pole of the moon. We're very interested in going into unexplored regions there, permanently shadowed craters. One of our biggest challenges is that we don't have GPS on the moon. We don't have satellites in orbit around the moon that can give us our location. We don't even get a chance to use a compass because the moon has no magnetic fields. And so we need to do land navigation based on terrain association. And so a lot of the skills that I have learned in my duties as an Army Reserve soldier are just immediately transferable over to our NASA mission. I think maybe a less tangible example is this idea of working in a small team, leading people and accomplishing a mission with a small number of people where there's a lot of unexpected things that may happen. So we try to mitigate that by doing all of this training. We prepare, we understand ourselves and our equipment, but then we're faced with a mission, things change, we need to improvise and we need to rely on the people around us. That's very similar to a space mission. So very similar, we go through years of training. We are in this dedicated team of professionals and, stuff happens in space. It's going to just throw one thing at you after another. And so those same kinds of skills that you would use in both cases, they really augment each other.
Yeah, and speaking with other astronauts with military backgrounds, and they've said the same thing along similar notes, that it's that heightened sense of awareness, whether you're on a Navy ship or you're in the space station. There's an intensity that always goes around and a heightened focus that you have to maintain the entire time since, it's one air hole away from things going sideways there on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could be called into immediate action at any time. So you need to be ready. There's just kind of this, talking with your teammates really helps. Also making sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're not too exhausted and tired to be able to get up at 2 a.m. and fight a fire if you need to. Really understanding everything that you could be called upon to do and keeping that fresh in your mind. So as an example, when I was in my crew quarters at night, every night before I went to bed, I would visually, as I'm, closing hatch windows and turning off lights, I would look at the exit paths and all of the places where we had emergency firefighting equipment and then our masks to prevent if we have an ammonia contamination. That way, that path is just in my mind before I go to bed. And so you can see how that would be kind of similar to like looking at your equipment and thinking about what you're going to do, what immediate steps you're going to take if you're called into action in the middle of the night.
Yeah, both situations where a person like myself probably wouldn't be getting much sleep. So the training is definitely important there. All right, so you are the first Army Reserve officer to receive the Basic Aviation Badge with Astronaut Device and Space Badge. What is the significance of that, and what does that mean to someone like yourself who likes to be a jack of all trades?
I mean, it's an incredible honor. I just blown away by receiving this honor, but it's really not about me. I think what this is recognizing is, really the work that we do in both agencies. And for me, I just think it's a great example of what it's like to be in the Army Reserve. The fact that you can have this civilian job and you can have your Army job at the same time, and that they're augmenting each other and complementing each other. I just think, the fact that it's the first award is for me, a great way to talk about how cool it is to be a citizen soldier. And it, maybe it sounds cheesy, but I love what I do in the Army so much. And so for that to get recognized, I think maybe people out there who are professionals, who are in their lives and their career and doing their work wouldn't really necessarily think about joining the Army at a later stage in life. But I did. I signed up for the Army very late. And I think it just goes to show that, this work with both of these areas is being recognized.
Let's go down just both the paths that you took. The first one being that you were a NASA astronaut. How did you get into that? It's not something you fall into, I imagine. What can you tell me about your steps that you took to get there?
Yeah, so my background is I'm a scientist, and I had studied biodefense, so viruses that are of biodefense concern, for example, smallpox, Ebola, Marburg. I had studied those while I was completing school. And then I had a lab at the Whitehead Institute, and I was also studying those viruses there. As I was doing all of this work, I was really doing this in conjunction with the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Disease, known as USAMRIID. That's up in Fort Detrick, Maryland. So the places that I was, that I had my lab or that I was doing school didn't have the high containment labs that we needed to work with these viruses. And so I was always working hand in hand with the Army as a civilian scientist. So that's where I really got to understand Army research and what we're doing to protect soldiers and all of the research that we're doing for biodefense. I kind of took a hard right turn and applied to be an astronaut. This was not really something that I thought was ever feasible. And I sent my application in, and then thought, well, this will be a good story that NASA rejected me. And I really did not expect to hear from them. So I was quite surprised when they actually asked me to come in for an interview. So I started in 2009 with NASA as a member of the 20th astronaut class. And then on the reserve side of things, so I was with NASA for, I think it was 13 years on my second space flight. And I'd been thinking about what I was going to do when I came back. And this is something that I knew I needed to think about because, as you said, there's an intensity to the training and to the mission. So you're training for 2.5 years for your mission before you go on your mission, and then you're in your mission for 6 months. And then you come back and NASA says, this has been so intense, you need to take the time, you got to recover physically and you need to recover, just kind of get back into your normal life because you've been spending 3 years really training and going on this incredibly intense mission. And I knew from the last time that when I came back, I needed something meaningful to do. NASA takes a step back and says, it's okay, go take care of yourself. And I didn't want to just sit on my couch and watch Netflix for a few weeks. I mean, I did want to watch Netflix for a few weeks, but then after that, I really wanted something to do. So I was looking for some way that I could contribute because I also had felt like my government had invested so much time and money in me and gave me all these opportunities. And I was so incredibly grateful for the training, the opportunity to fly in space, the opportunity to work with these incredible astronauts. Right. And I can never pay that back. It costs a lot of money to do astronaut training, but I do have time, and I felt like I could serve. So those two ideas came together and that sounded like a really great idea. But then I was thinking, well, I'm probably too old for this. So from my crew quarters on the space station, I was looking up the Army recruiting website, goarmy.com, from my space crew quarters. And I looked and, tried to figure out where my skills would fit and figured out what my MOS would be and realized that if I sent my packet in, I would get in right under that age deadline and wouldn't have to apply for an age waiver. So I started the application process from space.
That's incredible. All right. And so you're with the Army Reserve now. You're a member of the 75th U.S. Army Reserve Innovation Command. What can you tell me about what that command's role and mission is and how you contribute to it?
Yeah. So this command is set up in about 2019, fairly new. And really the goal and the mission of this command is to foster innovation within the U.S. Army Reserve. And so what that looks like is taking people who are doing things in their professional life that are really relevant to Army skills. So, for example, in my unit, we have things like AI and machine learning, cyber, autonomy, energy. I'm in the medical and biotechnology group. So all of these are areas that are dealing with this kind of cutting edge technology and research. And what we're doing is taking people who are